Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to attend our workshop today. What we're going to be looking at is explaining the development and initial implementation of the ultra-brief psychological interventions. My colleagues will follow with some other presentations around the use of the ultra-brief psychological interventions. So I'm just going to do the introduction. Initially, the UBPI was developed by Dr. Wendy Shoesmith and myself as a set of brief therapeutic tools and strategies that can be introduced to patients in a typical 5 to 10 minute consultation. It's also been proven to be useful for nursing staff, occupational therapists, dietitians, and other healthcare providers on the inpatient ward at the local psychiatric hospital in Malaysia. We've also introduced it to primary healthcare professionals in clinics that are based in the community. The techniques and strategies are from a variety of psychological interventions and have been modified and adapted to fit the ultra-brief concept. We tailored the tools to address the specific needs related to limited time and resources in the Malaysian setting, the specific needs of the individual, the family and the community, as well as considering the needs of the staff and health professionals that are providing the service for the patients. So yeah, we're just going to have a look at the development of the guide and explain a little bit about how we got to where we are with this program. So according to current evidence-based guidelines and best practice recommendations, it's been shown that most patients with a psychiatric disorder will recover and have a reduction in relapse rates if they have access to psychological interventions, which are like talking therapies. Other research has suggested beneficial outcomes for clients using a brief intervention. Typically, some success has been shown in 1 to 3 sessions. In Malaysia specifically, very few patients have access to any psychological interventions due to a lack of qualified therapists or psychologists, as well as a lack of time in the clinic. So there's limited availability of talking therapies for the patients in Malaysia. So there's been a lot of research conducted internationally that's looking at some psychological therapies being delivered by non-specialised health and medical staff. Most psychological interventions are delivered over a longer period of time and over multiple sessions, so typically more than 6 sessions, lasting approximately 45 to 60 minutes per session. This is not often available in the Malaysian Ministry of Health setting. Each patient typically only gets like 5 minutes with a medical doctor, and often it's not anyone that they've seen before and potentially will not come across again. So as part of Wendy's PhD, she was looking into collaborative care in the public mental health system in Malaysia, and out of that we've developed this program. The therapeutic alliance or a therapeutic relationship has been shown to be a major factor in treatment adherence and treatment outcomes. The ultra-brief psychological interventions initially grew out of discussions around ways to help practitioners build stronger relationships with their patients. We've conducted 2 successful pilot programs in Kota Kinabalu. The workshops were initially involved an online theory component and then followed up by a 2-day interactive and experiential skills development workshop. After the second workshop, we created an online supervision group where we've been able to maintain contact with participants and provide ongoing supervision and support to be able to implement the strategies. We did pre and post-course evaluations for both workshops using a 5-point Likert scale, and also specific written feedback, more of a qualitative form. So the data suggested that participants attended the workshop for a variety of reasons. Often they were told to come or told to attend, but most of the people that attended reported that they enjoyed the interactive nature of the workshop, including the role plays where they got to practice the skills and to observe the facilitators doing role plays as well. Everyone that's attended the workshop believed that the skills would be useful for some, if not all, of the patients that they're working with at the moment. So this is part of the post-course feedback. So this just gives an idea of some of the questions we asked as well. So the participants were generally really pleased with the course, found the online material useful. The information that was provided was easy to understand, relevant to their work, and participants believed that they would be able to utilise the skills and strategies that we've provided in this guide. So again, this is the preliminary results. So some comments included that the open learning, which allowed for self-paced learning, was very well received. In the online learning, we had questions and videos and worksheets for participants to have a look through and complete. And then there was a small examination at the end. So participants also found the experiential method we used allowed for a faster and better learning, the chance to see how the skills are useful across a variety of healthcare settings rather than specific only to mental health clinics. So the demonstration and support for a greater variety of techniques was also found very useful. Some specific examples, such as using mindfulness, using the goals and values, the physicalizing, these are all explained very clearly in the manual, so that people could take the manual away and continue working. So the outcomes so far suggest a need for further research, development and implementation of the intervention across a variety of health and community settings. We're planning a randomised control trial to be conducted at the end of 2020 or more likely early 2021, given the current circumstances that everyone is functioning in. Makes it really hard to do randomised control trials. So that will be postponed until the pandemic crisis has subsided. And these are just some of the references. So that comes to the end of this introduction. I hope that the following sessions will be very beneficial for you and elaborate more on the introduction that I've just provided. Any questions, if you can save them for the end, the 4 presenters will be available to answer questions and provide any further information that you need. So I will let the next speaker begin, and I look forward to
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Nicholas here, and today we'll be talking about the attention game, following on from Sandy's excellent presentation on the ultra-brief psychological interventions, looking at the utilization of mindfulness as a flexible tool in UBPI. So I think it's important that we look at who's been doing this so far. This has all been done by a group of medical students from UMS and Sandy as well, and myself. Okay, so the words in the topic are all relevant. We're going to expand a bit on the principles of mindfulness. We're going to talk about the research in mindfulness in secondary school students, and we're going to talk about the game, how we can practically and in an enjoyable manner implement the research. And of course, looking at some future research directions. We won't be talking about how to do mindfulness. This is not a workshop, this is a symposium. And you can find out how to do mindfulness from 1,000 videos on YouTube. And we're not going to review the existing literature on mindfulness because if it didn't work, we probably wouldn't be doing this. Okay, so mindfulness is very different from meditation. It's more of a secular version of the practices that are commonly associated in the way of meditation. But what we're doing is paying attention in a special way with flexibility, openness, curiosity, and kindness. Is it synonymous with relaxation? The answer is it's quite the opposite. Because in relaxation, what you're aiming to do is to control your feelings, to make sure that we get rid of feelings of anxiety or stress and to replace them with feelings of relaxation or calmness. In contrast, mindfulness techniques, they allow your feelings to be as they are. You aim to be open and curious about your feelings and allow them to come and stay and go as they wish. So, again, it's important that we look at the challenges of adolescent psychiatry in rural areas, which will be the focus of my presentation, because there's no point in me giving a generic presentation about mindfulness for everyone else. We feel that UBPI has a significant benefit in this group. Number one, drugs have side effects. Drugs cause increased suicidality. Psychotherapy, as we all know, is a rich person's tool and is disproportionately restricted to urban areas. You see, it causes a loop, a feedback loop, where underprivileged areas get less psychotherapy and thus their mental health is further weakened. And of course, the challenges in adolescence, as all of us remember from being adolescents, are how do we give a good psychological intervention and how do we keep the adolescents attracted? So this is where our project was performed in the middle of a district called Ranau, which is bigger than the 3 smaller states of Malaysia combined. And it covers an area roughly 100 km across by 100 km wide. This entire area on the Sabahan map does not have a psychiatrist. It has one medical officer who is interested in doing psychiatry. He will be speaking after me, so looking forward to your speech, Derek. And we did a study there focusing on mindfulness, internet addiction, and depression. The first thing you ask is, why are you looking at internet addiction in a rural area? Well, if we cast aside our stereotypes, actually, with good internet penetration, this has even less to do with a rural area than an urban area. And actually, the rate of prevalence of internet addiction was extremely high, more than 50% in this area, and more than 60% of students screened above mild for depressive symptoms. Again, mindfulness was correlated with depression in this group of students, and this was verified upon multiple regression. Whereas surprisingly, internet addiction scores didn't correlate with either mindfulness levels or depression levels. But there was a significant difference between internet addiction for males and females. You can guess as well as I do which gender scored higher, the males. So it's very good to do research and find results, but it's even better if we intervene. And clinically, it's of course vital to have a mindfulness-based intervention that can help with the depressive symptoms. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing this talk if mindfulness didn't work, and there's loads of evidence from meta-analysis out there that suggests that mindfulness works for depression, anxiety, and general psychological wellness. But how do we teach these young people in the schools in rural areas to do it? Again, gamification of learning is an educational trend, and we know very well as you sitting in this workshop or symposium today will know, people don't respond to a traditional class or workshop. So how do you gamify mindfulness? Well, this was based on some of Sandy's postgraduate work, and she looked at the effect of circus skills on wellness in young people. What are these circus skills? So we focused on unicycling, juggling, and stilt walking. And of course, the circus skills are a very good form of exercise, but they have also been found in the literature to help with various skills: connectivity, resilience, school readiness. It helps with teamwork, and of course, it helps with concentration and personal focus. Now, I want to bring you all on a thought experiment. Do mindfulness skills make children better at circus? Remember, mindfulness is being about flexibility, openness, kindness. If you're able to accept yourself being fearful on the stilts, if you're able to focus better on your breathing, posture, and your body by being more in the present moment, if you're able to be more flexible in terms of how you handle the anxiety that going on the unicycle has, and if you can be more open to experience, including experiences perceived as negative, you'd probably be better at circus. So what we're hypothesizing is that circus skills will probably be improved by the skill called mindfulness that we're trying to gamify, which will result in improved circus skills. And all of these improved circus skills will no doubt further increase the level of mindfulness, which will further improve this person's ability to do circus skills, which can then work wonders on resilience, teamwork, school connectivity. So we're looking at a very great virtuous cycle here. And I think with this kind of theoretical background, it would be possible to gamify mindfulness, make it attractive and interesting, and give people a real reason to do an ultra brief version of mindfulness while sitting on top of a unicycle. So how it worked out was that we had 4 types of circus equipment. Stilts were built, and also traditional bamboo stilts by the villagers themselves, giving them sense of ownership of the project. Of course, we did juggling with tennis balls, and we obviously bought some unicycles rather than made them. It was more done as a participatory action research model with a 4-station module, so it was more of a circus skills, then alternate with mindfulness, then alternate circus skills. So in general, we did a 1-hour coaching in beginning, followed by doing 45 minutes of a skill, teach skill, reinforce mindfulness, and so forth. So, for example, you went on the stilts, then we reinforced the mindfulness we taught earlier, how it can help you go on the stilts better. Then you go on the stilts again, then we reinforce the mindfulness lessons. And we found that people, when taught mindfulness on its own, get bored. I mean, it's a bit boring, sorry to say. Sit down, breathe, pay attention. It's a bit boring. It might be a bit boring. But put them in a situation where mindfulness actually helps, like being on a unicycle, and they suddenly find it very interesting. And mind you, this is not specialist skills. Though psychotherapist was used in running this project, it was all done by year 2 medical and year 3 nursing students, all below the voting age in Malaysia. Again, this is a very innovative project because there are many studies that link circus skills to individual enhancements in performance and soft skills. There's no doubt about that. And of course, there's tons of studies linking mindfulness to adolescent mental health. But what we're doing is, we're the first study in literature that merges the two. Therefore, we'll have the synergistic effects that we showed earlier in the diagrammatic summary. When you're doing circus skills, you become more mindful, and now that you're more mindful, you become better at circus. So it causes a virtuous cycle. Again, all this sounds very theoretical, so let's just show some pictures of us actually doing these ultra-brief psychological interventions in the mountains. So look, just to prove, they're all pretty young. So they actually went on the unicycle. Let's see if the video works. Okay, afraid, difficult. Never mind. You can assume they've done it, and you can also assume that they've been doing some juggling. It's a bit difficult with Evercam, but they actually managed to get the juggling skills down pat quickly. And if you look, these children walking on the traditional stilts within a few minutes or within about 15 minutes of learning how to do it, plus the mindfulness skills added on, they were able to navigate across the entire basketball court without any difficulty. So, did mindfulness help? We did a bit of a qualitative interview with a group of students, and they were all of the opinion that they preferred learning mindfulness this way, in ultra brief chunks and with an activity to anchor it to, rather than just sitting down in the workshop and doing it. The reason we say that is that this group of students has actually attended the mindfulness workshop we've done earlier. The one when we did the mindfulness, internet addiction, and depression study. We didn't just do a study because that's unfair. We did a mindfulness workshop as well, and the vast majority of them said it seemed useful, but perhaps not very interesting. And I assume when something's not interesting, the retention is somewhat lower. In this case, all the students who went on the stilts and the unicycles no doubt learned all the mindfulness skills they needed in a very short time. And that's amazing. And of course, they also became a little bit healthier and a little bit better at working in the team with their schoolmates and all that. But those are synergistic benefits. So where do we go from here? Of course, we've applied for a research grant to do this as a full experimental design for proper intervention versus control group. Of course, we're going to expand the scope of the project beyond merely one school. And this is very exciting because there are linkages between community, academia, and healthcare. There's the potential of industry involvement on the one end, and on the other end, there's a lot of very grassroots community involvement in this project. It really does increase the cultural capital and ethnic sensitivity of all of these organizations involved, because all the stilts were built by local craftspeople, funded by university grants, and it increases local pride and local abilities and confidence in their own talents. But of course, all this has clearly good for TV and radio, and it's obviously got very good visibility for not just for the university, though that's nice, but also just for mindfulness and mental health in general. Instead of being seen as something a bit interventional, a bit tertiary, we bring it down to the primary level of primary prevention, and intervention in the well. Again, I'd like to conclude by saying that mindfulness can be broken down into little chunks, as Sandy has explained in her first presentation. It is related with depression in younger people, as we did in our preliminary study earlier. And taking it a bit further, it can be married with circus skills, because these two, circus and mindfulness, are both very, very ancient skills, and we're making these two skills, age-old skills, new and relevant and interesting to today's youth. Again, from a wider perspective, this will no doubt combat stigma and increase mental health literacy. There are also important public health and social advocacy roles. Access to psychological interventions, I repeat, should be a right for all, and such interventions will reduce the social inequity. It will widen the catchment of psychological interventions and treatments, and it will shrink the treatment gap between have and the have-nots. And at the same time, remember who we used: young people and untrained mental health professionals. So this allows task shifting to people who can be trained and should be trained, and empowers everyone to take care of each other's mental health. All right, so with that, I finish my talk. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy what Dr. Derek has to talk about further, because he talks about using ultra brief psychological interventions, but in a true clinical scenario, as opposed Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Yeah. 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 I'm actually in my house, but I'm outside the house because the connection is better outside. Yeah, because in Malaysia the connection is not good in the house, so I'm actually outside the house, so it's easier to see. I can hear better. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Good day. So my name is Eugene, and today the title of the talk that I'm going to talk about is called "The Compass and the Map." It's basically exploring values and also goal setting for behavior modification. This is actually a tool that we use, and I usually have around 1.5 hours or to 1 hour to explain this and to show people how it's being used in a clinical setting. However, today I have to condense all of this into 15 minutes, so it will be a very brief overview. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me during the Q&A sessions, and I'll try my best to answer. So, what is values? Values basically, as defined by Dow in 2015 in his article, it's freely chosen, verbally constructed consequences of ongoing dynamics and evolving patterns of activities. So basically, it's a word verbally constructed. It's a word that an individual can choose. It is not a moral value. It's not something that is embraced by society. Instead, it's a verbal construct that we choose or that individual choose on their own to represent something that has a very deep meaning to it. And using that verbal construct, they move on with their life and carry on to be able to do meaningful day-to-day activities or even decision makings. It sounds very obscure and even sounds very bombastic, but as we go along explains later in the examples, I hope you'll be able to get a better picture. Values, the word itself, and also value work is a core therapeutic process of acceptance commitment therapy. ACT itself has actually been around since 1980s, but over the last few years it's gradually gaining momentum, and it's being incorporated to a number of things, including our clinical guidelines and even some of WHO's work. So this core therapeutic process of value work has a lot of evidence to show that it actually works in multiple areas, of mental health. It's a process that we know it works, but the exact mechanism is unknown, unlike the other therapeutic processes of ACT. The reason why it is not clearly known is that people are actually having difficulty trying to measure it from a quantitative manner. Qualitatively, they could define it, but they can't measure it quantitatively. Thus, they are unable to confirm some of the mechanisms. But people have postulated the mechanisms that value work is involved with. One of the possible mechanisms is what we call priming, or being consciously aware. By consciously selecting a particular word to represent yourself and keep reminding yourself about that word, you tend to become more aware, or you prime yourself with that word and you make future decisions based on the word you choose. It also becomes an important component of self-concept. So our identity, the concept of ourself, is something that we choose to work on, or something that we choose to embrace based on what we accept. So by tagging on a value upon it, it makes that self-concept clearer. And if we do need to make any future decisions or anything that we want to change in our life, we must be consistent with that self-concept that we have of ourselves, and then we make changes from there. It also has, even though I say it's not socially accepted, it's not defined by social, when you choose a particular value, you do have a social pressure of trying to live up to that value also. So as such, it actually kind of motivate you and push you forward to embrace whatever behavior modification that you or the individual might need. So one of the papers that this whole slide itself that I've used and which I find the most useful is actually, if you can look up Jennifer et al. 2018, Assessing the Valuing Process in ACT. It's actually a very good paper that kind of summarizes everything about values from a scientific point of view, and the possible mechanism, and even how they could there's a possible means of actually measuring it. But again, it's not quantitative, it's more of a qualitative measurements. So areas of applications. So value work, where we use values in our therapeutic work. It can be done in a few minutes. I've done it as short as 2 minutes itself. It's more of a tool to guide an individual instead of a tool to use on its own to treat. By identifying value, we were able to build on other forms of techniques so that the individual can make behavior modifications, can modify their behaviors. Areas of applications is we could use it as substance use disorder. We commonly talk about things like motivational interview. Value adds additional layers on MI to make it more compatible and more usable by the client. Anxiety disorders, often clients who suffer from anxieties have difficulty making decisions or trying to carry out their activity of day-to-day living. So value would be able to help move them, to push them, or even to guide them. It's the same for even for depression. Schizophrenia is interesting. We know that when our clients experience schizophrenia and their activity of daily living is severely impacted, while abstract thinking might somehow be impacted also, but clients who are not experiencing excessive negative symptoms could still somehow make decisions from their own on how to carry on their life. So value work itself could be used as a motivational factor to push them forward. And of course, there's many other areas that we can use value work. So to summarize what value actually is, if you look at this picture, first start looking at the grounds. You see there's multiple roads to go everywhere. You can go to the sea, you can leave out the picture, you can even go to the ruins, everything. It's generally not really guided. You are free to walk anywhere. Think of values as the lighthouse that's standing in the middle there, the bright light at the center there. So what value does is that it provides you as an anchoring point, as a guiding light somewhere in your life, and you try to move towards the lighthouse, like how a boat will try to move towards the lighthouse. And along the way, even though there are multiple paths that might lead you astray, that might bring you elsewhere, the value is going to guide you to go towards the right direction. So another metaphor that I like to use is actually the compass and the map. Of course, now because of this online, most of us are unable to be in Taiwan today, where this conference is going to be used. But I'm going to use this as examples. Anyway, so values are the compass that the person is holding in the hand. In order to get to the university, in order to get to National Zhongguan University from any point within this map, we have many ways. We can choose to take the bus, we can choose to walk, we can choose to take a cab, we can use the bicycle. How we go towards there is guided by this map. But in order to put an orientation, in order to be able to have ourselves knowing which direction to move, we will need a compass. And value itself is that, the compass. We can use values to move us towards the university using that compass. However, along the way, we can be distracted. We can stop for food. We can stop for any other things that can distract us. But with the compass, we will always be pointed in the right direction to head towards there and need accordingly. So if you reflect that upon our day-to-day behavior modification, often we get distracted. Often we get to move around, need to do many things. And when we come back to values and it redirects us, it points us towards the right direction. So one of the ways, the simplest way to actually ask someone or a client of mine to actually pick up the values that are important, I will actually show them this list. So this list is actually translated for our local use. There's 3 languages, the Malay, English and Mandarin. The question that I will actually start off is, looking at this list, can you pick 3 words that you resonates, that you find you have the most connection to? Any 3 words. I give them some time to take a look. Like for myself, balance, it's one of the values. Recognition is one, spirituality is another. So these 3 words resonate very well with myself. And whenever I need to make decisions or carry out my life that I feel that I'm indecisive, I will actually go towards those words. One thing, if you remember correctly at the very beginning, I said it's freely chosen. Values are freely chosen. So those words that I choose might not have the same meaning for any of you within this. Balance, for instance, balance. For me, balance is a balance of spirituality. It's a balance of recognition. It's a balance of living my life, separating between different regions of family, work, career, friends. It has that sense of balance. For others, balance could just mean work-life balance. To even more extent, for balance, it could just mean taking the moderate path. It could have many meanings for everybody. But for myself, the word balance, it's unique to me and only me. So whenever I need to be guided, and I refer back to balance, it has to, the meaning of it, the underlying meaning of that is actually something that is truly reflected within myself. So I digress. This is basically one of the ways we use to help our clients to identify values that's important for them. Another way is actually to ask them questions like, imagine yourself standing at a point 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Everything has gone smoothly in your life. Your illness is gone, your doubts, your worries, your fears is gone, and everything has gone smoothly. Now, from that point in life, in the future, and you look back, how would you describe the life that you have just led? Using 1 or 2 words. Then I'll go on to ask the client. When once the client provide me a word or 2, I would go on to clarify and say, does this actually describe your whole life? Does it actually colors your life? And along the way, we will come up with words that will quite similar to this list that we show. And once we have the value, we would be able to use it to help our clients. There are many ways we could use, but today for this, I'm only going to talk about goal setting. So for us to have behavior modifications, we usually set various goals and a number of goals of how to go. Goals could be short term, could be long term, could be even mid term. What this short, middle, long is actually defined by the client itself. It's not something that we set on a particular time limit. One thing for sure is that a short-term goal, multiple short-term goals lead to a mid-term goal, and multiple mid-term goals tend to lead towards a long-term goal. We try to avoid goals that are too vague. I want to be happy all the time. I want to be great in everything I do. We try to avoid that. Instead, we break down goals to a very small chunk that is more usable, something that we can adjust. And this is how the mnemonic that we usually use for SMART, SMART. So in order to set a goal, it has to be very specific. It has to be something that can be stated. It's motivated by values. By choosing this goal, by going towards this behavior, by making these changes, it will bring me closer to the idea of I'm living a life that is more likely linked to the values that I have, that we pictured earlier. It has to be attainable, meaning that it has to be something that is achievable within the certain limitations that the individual set. It has to be realistic. It cannot be something vague or impossible. And of course, it's time limited, meaning that the goal that we set has to be of a particular duration. 1 hour, 1 day, or even a few days. So it gives you an example again. To prepare for this particular presentation, I know I have a deadline to set, but I'm not that keen because this is something new and it's scary. Now, if you go back to the value I talked about just now, we talk about recognition. So in order to be recognized, I need to do the work. I need to make behavior such as preparing this and actually recording this. So it's quite specific. My goal is to complete this presentation that I'm presenting to you now. I'm motivated by the value of wanting to get recognized. It's attainable in the sense that I am able to finish this. If I take the time to learn it, it's realistic also because there's given us particular timeline and I know that I have the equipment I can do it. And time limited, of course, is preparing all of this before the deadline and email it to you all so that you all can see this, or of which when you are seeing this is the day of the conference itself, the day of the workshop. So by moving through all of this, I've somehow push aside my doubts, push aside my reluctance, and carry on to record this. And here we are now. You're actually listening this recording itself. So this is one small example of how we actually use goal setting. The other way of how we can use values, which I'm not actually putting on this slide, is that ask our client to make decisions. When our clients are required to make decisions in their life, for instance, substance use. A client is using substance to, in a way, in a form of actually gaining the ecstasy or the pleasure out of the usage. It's also, if you look at it psychologically, it's a way of a client escaping from something. That's how we usually say using the substance as a form of escapism. So by giving them values, we can help them guide in terms of, if you're going to move closer to the value of your life, would substance use still have a role in it? By using that method, they would more likely to incline to consider changing, or more likely to incline to actually stop using the substance. And then another example is actually the idea of baby steps, graded exposure. So today, they are using the example again of preparing this slide. I'm very reluctant. So I know I'm guided by my values. I want to get the recognition. So let's start by one thing first. I am going to turn on the computer first. I'm going to sit in front of the computer first and let's see how am I going to go on. Is this going to bring me closer to recognition? And to add one more layer of it, in order for me to sit down and start doing this recording, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely am I going to do it? I will actually ask myself. I would say 5, because I'm a bit lazy and unmotivated. So what's limiting me? What's making me feeling lazy? I'm not happy to be able to use some of these equipments that's being imposed upon us. So how can we reduce the limiting factors? I can learn how to use it. I can find out what's the best way. I can test it out first before I record it. So if I ask my client again, if I do that, is that going to increase the skill? Yeah, instead of 5, now I'm more likely to do it at 7. And I forgot to mention, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 means that I would never do it. 10 means I would definitely do it even if it's the end of the world. So usually we try to get our client to give us a scale of around 7, and with the 7 we know that they are more likely to achieve their goals and finish their behavior modification. So if a client say 5, as I mentioned just now, we try to help them to move up again. Are you able to move it up closer to 10? By using this scale and asking about the limitation, how to reduce it, we find that it does help encourage behavior modification. So I'm very sorry, my deepest apologies to feel that this is actually a sudden cut off, but I do have a time limitation. I do hope that whatever that I mentioned just now would be able to give you a rough overview of how to use values and also goal setting. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much.
Hello, greetings.
Thank you, Jim, for your very important thoughts. Very important, even only and then say hello.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Anyone want to make some questions or make some comments? Or you can just type on the chat. Okay, try.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we should continue with Eric's one first, and we can get the Q&A later.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe you can question later.
Hello, greetings. My name is Dr. Derek Chow. I am a medical officer working in psychiatry department in Hospital Queen Elizabeth, Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, Malaysia. I was a former medical officer in Ranau Hospital, and I use a lot of ultra brief psychological intervention. So today I will briefly talk to you about how the UPPI is being used in inpatient and outpatient setting, and of course some rural town experience sharing in my former workplace. So without further ado, let's have a look in the map of Malaysia. Sabah is in the east of Malaysia, and from the box there it enlarged into this area. So to your left it's the Kota Kinabalu, the capital city in Sabah. Queen Elizabeth Hospital is the main referral center over this region. It has the psychiatry department. And to the right is where Ranau Hospital is. Basically, that is a district hospital with a basic facility, with no psychiatrists around. So if all the patient needs to see a psychiatrist, they would have to travel around 124 kilometers, which is approximately 2.5 hours journey. So they would have the chance to see this mountain, the Great Mount Kinabalu, on their way. So this is the picture of Ranau town itself, a rural, serene town, and of course, sadly, connected by these muddy, hilly roads. This is the picture of Ranau Hospital with its infrastructure was being built in 1975, 91 beds available in total. So I use mindfulness and ultra brief psychotherapy for these several reasons. Number one, to help patients coping with symptoms. Number two, lifestyle modification. Number three, managing own relapses. Number four, pill-free treatment dose reduction. Number five, self-harm reduction. Number six, substance use reduction. 7, chronic pain management. 8, life goal setting and decision making. And number 9, general health maintenance. So I do have several cases that we can actually go through in brief. So number 1, we have the lifestyle changes. So this is a case of a schizophrenia of 36 years old lady. She's a staff nurse. So the problem was she has been having persistent insomnia despite in remission. She requested for benzodiazepine use repetitively. What we did was we explore her daily scheduling, her daily routine. From there, we explore her sleep hygiene. And subsequently, we introduced some motivational interview for making some changes, like the use of coffee, tea, starvation, exercise, and etc. Eventually, she was able to sleep without lorazepam after being seen back in 2 weeks' time, and she also started to exercise in the evening. This is a brief outlook of how the scheduling was done, with the time being written here, and then with all the activities written another side. And from there, we could see there were some issues here about the sleep hygiene, not adherence to sleep hygiene. So we actually discussed a little bit about the reason behind all these habits, and then we made some changes over here. So we got this in summary: plan to sleep at 10, 7 to 9 for leisure time, avoid evening coffee, substitute with some other non-caffeinated drinks, avoid sleeping in empty stomach, and from previously not exercising to exercise. So we did some brief motivational interview over here, motivated her for a treadmill run for 10 minutes, making a change. Okay, next, the second case. This is a case about nerve pain and facial spasm. A 29 years old dietitian having a condition called the very close proximity of her left 7th cranial nerve with the left anterior cerebellar artery for 2 years. So whenever the artery pulsates, it actually compressed the 7th nerve and caused involuntary facial spasm and sharp left facial pain, migraine-like headache, and it was not responding to any pregabalin, clonazepam, or celecoxib and its combination. Sadly, she developed major depressive disorder in 5 months' time, started duloxetine. Chronic pain of pain score 8 to 10 usually impaired her work, sleep, daily routine, social life, caused a lot of embarrassment, and she eventually resigned from work. She experienced new pain symptoms and she became dependent on tablet zolpidem 10 mg for sleep. Poor sleep leads to irritability, aggravated facial pain, severe headache, burning pain in fingers and toes, aggravated depression. So in order to break the chain, she felt that there was a need to use zolpidem. But in the end, she was saddened because she was dependent on zolpidem. So what we did? So she came for zolpidem restock and 3-weekly hospital Queen Elizabeth review, which was 124 kilometers away, and we offered 3 monthly appointments for UBPI locally, 5 minutes from her house. We introduced mindfulness, we did some psychoanalysis, some cognitive behavioral triad and pain analysis, some thought diary maintenance, and upgrade the mindful breathing to physicalization of the pain, and we work towards her progress. In March, first contact. 1 week later, stock up zolpidem. 3 months later, we thought about mindful breathing. We suggested thought diary. 3 months again later, we did physicalization and life goal analysis. Then 1 month later, she was able to cut down zolpidem use to 3 to 4 times per week. She was euthyming. And exactly 1 year after the first contact, the zolpidem use was reduced to once per week, started working as account auditor, and the daily use of mindfulness. This is a brief explanation of how we discuss about mindfulness. And she did a little bit of studies on major depressive disorder symptoms, and we did the cognitive behavioral triad here. She did a little bit of research on how she can modify her thought, her emotion, and her behavior, and about her pain. And yeah, she managed to cherish her life a bit more. This is the pain and mood diary, in which you see that the yellow coding actually codes for mild pain, the red codes for the severe pain, the blue the moderate pain. 4 severe pain days in August 2019. In September 2019, 2 pain-free days and 3 moderate pain days and no severe pain days. Then in October, I believe that you can clearly see that most of the days were mild pain, yellow in color, and only 2 days were a bit painful, severe pain. But overall seems to be a lot of improvement. She was committed. She did a lot of exercise, some slow walking, some treadmills and relaxation and rest, and some outdoor activities eventually here. She practiced sleep hygiene, and she learned that she can't stop the wave, but she can actually learn how to surf the wave. So the next case is a self-harm reduction case, a borderline personality disorder, 18 years old girl, recurrent mood swings, emptiness, daytime sleepiness. She did very bad for her exams. She had to cut her forearm 2 to 3 times per month. Then we actually explored her goals and values, and then we explored the effectiveness of the self-harm behavior, and then we did something interesting here, mindfulness with physicalization as alternative coping style. Initially thought about mindful breathing, then suggest to give the sadness, the emptiness, some characteristic that we can manipulate it. So she described the uselessness and she molded into several forms in her mind. Into a bowling ball, into a heavy ball with spikes. She juggled them around and she felt the pain. Then it became lighter balls and she squeezed these balls into a pile of mud. She then, in the end, molded it into a fragile vase and she smashed the vase onto the ground. And poof, it relieved her frustration and there was no need for wrist cutting. This was her another mood diary. Okay, the green and the grey codes for happy and stable mood over here. This is the life goal UBPI. See, the first one was she planned to start the diploma, to study diploma in technology. She wanted to get a loan for her studies. She decided to stop her current exam, government school exams. She would want to have healthy lifestyle, so she decided to adhere to the food pyramid, and she would want to go for exercise, jogging. If it's too hectic for her, she would go skipping. So the commitment. So she recorded what she did. She jumped rope, she do skipping, play piano, she even practiced French. Okay, and she wrote some quotes to cheer her up. And yep, August seems quite friendly for her. So the next one would be the general health maintenance. This is quite straightforward case. Schizophrenia, 52 years old man, stay alone, unemployed, with hypertension, diabetes. He had relapses every 2 months, hypertensive urgency, uncontrolled diabetes. So we explored the meaning of wellness, and we devised a plan, a get well plan. So he agreed for the IM depot for the schizophrenia, and he achieved remission in 2 months' time, and we actually finally get him to manage his own medical condition. So 6 months later, he was able to join political party, and he finally got his own salary. We reinforced with some goal and values exploration. So this is the getting well plan. He said that he would want to see doctor, get treated, then we talk about balanced, healthy diet over here. Then he said he would want to rear some chicken, some farm work. And what happened there was he was able to help a political party in Ranau, and he was being given salary. This is about the pill-free treatment. Case 1 is about a generalized anxiety disorder in pregnancy, and second is a hypothyroidism with anxiety disorder. They were extremely worried while waiting for the investigations to be done, but they were unkeen for medication. So we gave them a dose of mindfulness and did some self-heart rate checking and diary. So we did some biofeedback on them, and with some goals and values, and they keep track of their investigation. So in the end, things turned out quite well. Not a single tablet started. This is just another PTSD case with decision making. So a bit of long stories, but mainly this person actually underwent all the treatment. The mindfulness, the life goals again, and value, and scheduling. So in summary, UBPI is relatively safer because the inputs and ideas are from client themselves, lower dose of medication, cost effectiveness, time efficient and effective, relatively easier to administer, relatively easy to accept, no geographical barrier. It is not about religion. A lot of empowerment to manage own health, building good therapeutic alliance. It ensures treatment compliance as well, and we never run out of topic to discuss with client. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and If you do have any question that you want to ask, please feel free to do so, and have a good day. Thank you.
Is there anyone have question for us? Yeah. You can raise your hand or maybe I could just add a bit of context a bit. Yeah. Sorry. So UBBI is actually a very quick psychological intervention, and originally when we proposed for this symposium, it was meant to be a workshop where we were actually showing you all the skills so that you could understand it better than putting it into words. My apologies, our presentations might not fully translate that when we present it as a word as how we presented. But I just want to highlight a few things about COVID-19. And during this pandemic, we actually use UBBI to translate it to two versions. One's a Malay version for our frontliners, and another is actually an English version, also similar to frontliner, but also for any form of healthcare workers. That manual, we translate it, we develop it, and we actually spread it around and gave it to the frontliners and anyone else who need it without any intervention. So the whole UBBI module was manualized and distributed out around for people to use. And we actually received quite a lot of positive feedback from it, and it's actually in the midst of about being published into a book. So the reason why I'm highlighting this is because UBBI actually allows us some form of flexibility to deliver psychological intervention in time-limited areas, and it's also very highly adapted. We could adapt it to very variety of situations, from even COVID-19, medical students, and also, as Derek showed, multiple scenarios of diagnosis lah. So I just want to put that into context to everyone here first before the Q&A. So with that, if anyone have any questions, feel free to ask.